Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine, and today I was joined by a very special guest, Josh Franceschi, lead singer of the band You Me at Six. Josh is also a great, huge, big football fan. He's an Arsenal fan, and he played in the FIFA tournament that the Premier League set up back in April of 2020. He was the last left-standing celebrity entrantee. You know what I'm saying? And then he went out against Dwight McNeil, who it turns out is very, very good at FIFA. So I spent some of my afternoon watching that. In fact, I spent about 45 minutes watching that, and then I'm pretty sure I forgot to ask him about it. So that's a good start. But things we did talk about: why he's an Arsenal fan, growing up watching Arsenal with his dad. Also, we talked a little bit about the intersection between music and football culture. We talked about Tomas Rosicky, who is a friend of Josh's. And what else did we talk about? And we talked about politics as well, and the sort of intersection of that with music and with football, and whether it inspires his writing. And Marcus Rashford came up in the conversation. It was wide-ranging. I really enjoyed doing it. So thanks to Josh for attending. Josh and his band You Me at Six also have a new album coming out in January, SUCKAPUNCH. It's all written in capitals, so I feel like I should say it like that. SUCKAPUNCH. And it's really good. So you should have a listen to that as well, in all the places that you would listen to it. But whatever, I'm sure everyone that's listening likes music and football, and I just feel like that conversation they don't cross over as much as they used to. I'm keen for a dialogue to begin or to continue if it was happening somewhere else and I wasn't listening to it. That's the main thrust of my interest here. Anyway, no more of this nonsense insolence. It's time now for me to leave you in the warm hands and the very cool embrace of Josh Franceschi. So, Josh, you're an Arsenal fan, right?
I am, yeah.
And that has been the case since you were a child, I assume.
Yeah, so my dad actually took me to Highbury when I was 6 months years of age in sort of backpack thing.
Okay.
So yeah, I've never really had a chance to support anybody but Arsenal. It's in my blood. It's in my great grandmother and my grandmother from Woolwich, obviously where we originated from, the Arsenal. So yeah, it's one of those ones, man.
I was going to ask you about the association. So it's from the family then.
Yes. So my dad's the first team he ever went and saw play football was Arsenal. His granddad took him, and then his mum took him, and then he took me. So yeah, it's always been Arsenal from day dot.
And you're a season ticket holder, right?
Yeah.
So what's it been like this year, not being able to attend games?
To be honest, it's been no different to how it usually is, because I'm usually on tour anyway. So I kind of, when I'm at home, it's something that my dad and I love to do together. I've been down at the Emirates now for probably about 6-7 years. Had some great nights there. Had some pretty poor ones as well. So yeah, but no, I think football without fans is just a pretty empty space, to be honest. I think it's great that they've managed that the clubs and the sort of Premier League and UEFA and that sort of stuff have managed to get it going to a point. But I mean, really, it's a working man's sport, at the end of the day, and that's the culture of football is very much the fans are the bloodstream of any club. So yeah, I can imagine for those that are lucky enough to be able to go and see their team play week in, week out, it's probably been a pretty rough time. But I'm so used to being on a bus in America or at a laptop, backstage somewhere watching us play. So watching us on Sky Sports or BT hasn't been too bad. But yeah, I'd much rather be there, obviously.
Does this mean that there's a sort of litany of people associated with you and your family that get to use your tickets when you can't go most of the time?
Yeah, it's a joke, to be honest, because my dad will just sort of like will just basically turn around to his mates and be like, "Oh, I've got 2 tickets to the Arsenal on Saturday," and I'd be like, "Yeah, are they paying for them? Because I am, so I wouldn't mind maybe somebody chucking me a bit of cash." No, but it's nice because obviously if I can't go, then we've also got
Yeah.
a little crew of us that will go, and we always go. There's like a little Turkish place called Noah's just by Highbury Islington Station, and we'll go there before and have a bite to eat and go down all together. So it's good for my dad's, and it's even better for me to. I mean, I promised myself more than I promised him really that if I ever got into any sort of decent money, that the first thing I'd be buying would be finding a way of getting me and him into on the fast track, so to speak. Which we were lucky that we had a few people that helped us get tickets probably sooner rather than we could have. But it's such a big part of my upbringing, and the relationship with my dad is strong on other levels, of course. But I mean, football is something that we've always been bonded over and had a great love for. So yeah, it's nice to go and share those moments with him.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it kind of goes without saying, doesn't it? It's almost a sort of not a cliche in a negative sense, but the idea of paternal bonding over football is sort of ever present throughout England. You presumably then you have experienced that throughout your life, right?
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree with you more. And it's one of those things that, like, we've had, especially sort of over the last few years, we've had moments where, like, we've gone and been at Wembley and watched the FA Cup final, and there was I think it was the year we beat Hull in the FA Cup final. They played one of our songs at half time, and it was sort of like, that's just sort of stuff that you can't really put a price on, that sort of stuff, because I mean, actually the beautiful thing about that final against Hull was that it was a complete disaster, really, for the first sort of like 25 minutes. And actually, it's one of the times where I got very excited, put it that way. We ended up being in a box because basically we were part of like some sort of relationship with a company that's why our song got played at half time. And so then they invited me and my dad as a guest into their box, and then I got very, very excited on the wine and the beers because we were losing 2-0 to Hull, and I wasn't having it. And I said to myself, I'm not doing this sober. So I got pretty ratted. I don't think I'm banned from Club Wembley, but it's not easy for me to get in anymore, because at one point I was sort of climbing in between the different boxes, telling everyone to not take their lives so seriously and start singing some Arsenal songs and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that was a big day out.
So is that your version of trashing a hotel room?
Yeah, getting told off by Club Wembley and the hospitality thing at Wembley. Yeah,
it's much more understandable, I would say. So that's
100%.
That's good. So, I mean, did you play football when you were growing up?
Yeah, I'm not one of those that will turn around and say that I had trials at West Ham or anything like that. But yeah, I played a lot of football.
Did you have a position?
So I used to be centre mid, and then the engine went a little bit, and now I play a lot of. There's actually a really cool app. I don't know if you're aware of it, called Footy Addicts.
Right. Yeah.
And it's basically like Tinder for football in the sense that they basically organise games all across the country, and they organise refs and pitches and bibs and football and that sort of stuff. And somebody comes and hosts the game, and you basically just rock up and you play. So I play a lot of that. I literally live in Hackney, so I actually play in Islington, a place called Paradise Park. And over the last few years, I've just realised that, especially when you start playing like 18, 19-year-old kids that are coming down and playing as well, and you're like, I don't have it anymore to like go up and down, even if it is only 7-a-side. So I've kind of
you're relying on your vision now, Josh, right? Your experience.
It's that I'm playing like left wing back, left centre back a lot of the time now. Don't ask why. I like to cut in and spray him. So that's my position these days.
You're an inverted fullback. You're right-footed.
Yeah. So but it's not good news when a lad with a lot of energy comes sprinting at me, I'm always kind of, I try and give myself 5 yards or so.
That's the experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you do this on your own, or do you do it like with some friends, or?
So yeah, one of my friends who used to live, one of my old college mates who lived in Central for a bit, like told me about it. We went and played once or twice, and then he moved back to Surrey, and I was like, well, I'm not going to stop. And then all that seemed to happen is I kept on telling my muso mates that live in London, look, this is what's going on. And because it's like that. If you're trying to get like 10 or 12 mates to play 5-a-side, 6-a-side, and get people to commit to it, is tough, because especially as you get older, life gets in the way. So now, like, there's loads of like my mates who play in bands, and then like DJs and stuff. Like, we all go down and play at different times, but more often than not, I'm playing on my own.
You get recognised?
Strangers. Yeah, I have done actually quite a few times, and it's a bit strange. More over at the beginning of a game, like when you walk over and introduce yourself to your teammates, and you sort of get that, like,
what do you do, that kind of thing.
Not that, but like, there's that. But then I also, like, I know when somebody knows, because I know what the face is. Because it's just one of those that I've kind of gotten used to over the years at different times. Like, not in a sort of big-headed way, but it's just one of those things that you can pick up on people that do know who you are and that don't. And it makes no difference to me, because in there I'm just down there to play football, but also like to make friends. And I've actually made some really good mates from going down there. And a lot of the time, the spirit of the game is really decent, and there's not too much attitude. But what's also really cool is that, like, you get people, like, both boys and girls, from all over the place playing. I've literally played with, the Spanish lads who play football in a very different way. The Italians who absolutely love to roll around on the floor. you got the French who are a bit more cultured on the ball, and like, there's lots of different styles, and I think that's really interesting. And then you also get like the lads from the area that are just sort of like, there's so many great characters down there. So yeah, it's something I definitely recommend to your listeners. It's something I've really enjoyed doing, and it's a really cool idea. I'm looking forward to actually opening back up after this next lockdown.
Can I ask, just to linger on the being recognised thing a little bit, if you are recognised, or as you say, if you know that somebody knows you, does it ever change the dynamic of the team? Because, like, if you feel like one or two people recognise you, do you get less flack, or do you get more, or does it change anything?
Not really, because I feel like my attitude when I play, I'm definitely one of those people that talks a lot on the pitch, and it's always like, I'm always encouraging people. So like, not in a strange way, but like, I'm liked down there, if that makes sense, because I'm just like, I want people to have fun. I want to enjoy it. I hate the thought of making people feel bad. And I think early on in the game, people can sense, you can sense who the flashy ones are. You can sense who the mouthy ones are, the sort of bullish ones. And also, like, some of my mates that I go down with are in far bigger bands than I am, so they more often than not get more recognised than I do, so it's not really a stress for me, to be honest. But I've got some of my mates down there now. Like, the thing is that it's more about what people will say when you're not there. So I went down, I didn't play for about 3 months because I was for 2 months because I was in Thailand making a record. And I came back, and one of the lads that I play with was just like, where you been then? And I was like, I've been just recording a record in away. And then, like, some of the other lads overheard it, like, oh, superstar, like, they all call me superstar now down there, which is ironic more than anything. But as I said, like,
you're just one of the lads then,
just one of the lads, exactly how I like it. And like, it's, at the end of the day, like, I'm just an ordinary dude that has from time to time has extraordinary circumstances through the band. And other than that, I'm just literally just want to have a laugh with people. Nothing too stressful, nothing too serious.
Hey, well, listen, you mentioned friends of yours who are in bands who also play football with you. I wanted to ask you about this, the sort of the intersection between football culture and music, because I think we're about the same. You're 30, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So about the same age, and I remember that intersection being a lot stronger and a lot more prevalent in the '90s, particularly with Britpop and associations with bands and teams like Oasis and Man City and that sort of thing. And then
Sure.
I don't know if it's just the kind of music I was listening to, but I felt like that faded away a little bit over time. And also, I think about my dad, right, who grew up in Harlow in Essex, so not far from London, and he was a weirdo and he loved music and Van Morrison and Bob Dylan and Neil Young, but he also loved football and he also played football. And I feel like those two things gelled in a way that when I was growing up in the 2000s, that they didn't. Like at my school, you sort of either liked football or you liked, music, but they didn't really cross over. And so I'm always interested when I meet musicians who are also massive football fans, or vice versa. Was that your experience of it, or is it totally different to mine?
No, it's not too dissimilar. I mean, like, I'll tell you a story that I kind of is become like a bit of a wives' tale in terms of Unit 6 because of what happened with it and how it ended up being. But I went to Arsenal every year, have like a foundation ball, it's like a black tie event at the end of every season, and I went once as a guest of I think it was somebody at FIFA. I can't exactly remember, but anyway, I went down there, and obviously all the players are there, and it's also something for the fans as well, and certain fans that have been invited or have done something special within the community that year, whatever. Anyway, I'm experiencing a lot that like throughout the night I'm bumping into players, but no one is bothered. Like in the sense of like no one cares.
Yeah.
And Rudimental were there and people like that, and everyone loves them, and they're performing and everyone's all over it. And I sort of lost faith of me becoming pals with anybody in the team at this point. And I'm on my way back from the toilet, and I like physically bump into Tomas Rosicky, who
Right.
we get chatting, and like his favorite bands like Foo Fighters and like Slipknot and stuff like that. And we get chatting and we like exchange numbers, and I don't really think anything of it. And then 4 or 5 years later, we're still really good friends. And whenever we play in Prague and the Czech Republic, he comes out to the shows and we go for dinner, and he comes to festivals and hangs out and stuff. And what's interesting is that he will always tell me that like for a lot of the guys, that music was a massive part of like his growing up.
Yeah.
But he was probably the only person in the whole of the Arsenal squad that liked music that wasn't hip hop or rap.
Right.
And so I think like maybe like there's that thing now where a lot of the footballers are about now, like back in the day, like if you played for City, or you even just go up in Manchester, like you like the Stone Roses or Oasis, because like you said, there's that big Britpop thing, and there hasn't really been that much of that crossover. I feel like.
So it
But
might
yeah,
be the music that you and I were listening to in the 2000s,
yeah,
rather,
maybe,
rather
man.
than
That's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like the
as the
people that
FIFA
are really good
soundtrack changed.
yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. And like, I remember when we were on, that was one of the things that I experienced a lot when we were on FIFA 13, and we started, also, sorry, FIFA 14, and we started doing like promo around it, and we did like Soccer AM and did the FIFA 13 launch and all that sort of stuff. Like, I noticed that like people would recognize me like down at the Emirates because of seeing me in Soccer AM or hearing our song on FIFA, and it's like that would, and I'd look at them and be like, you don't look like stereotypical Arsenal U-6 fans. So again, I think there is definitely that thing of like, I think that sort of stuff helps, like bring back in that sort of music, that guitar music culture back into football. But yeah, it's not very common that comes around.
I still think about the opening of Road to the World Cup '98 with song 2.
Yeah,
that's what I think about when I think of FIFA. I think that's sort of my defining memory of it. But I think you're right. I think that's actually quite an important thing. I think if we think about the way that the internet can sometimes act as a bit of a feedback loop, as can individual groups or little societies within schools and stuff, you do end up getting stuck in a groove sometimes, and only hearing stuff that is similar to the things that you already like. So actually, when you do have something which crosses a lot of those groups, something like FIFA, having a soundtrack which has, to its credit, has always been, fairly wide ranging. That must have been cool. How did you find out that you were going to be on the soundtrack for that game?
We were in LA at the time, and we just finished putting together our song "Live to Lie," which ultimately ended up being on the game. And we actually, the lady Sybil came from EA Sports, came to the studio, and we went out for dinner, and we were just sort of hanging out, and I was explaining to her, like, why it would be so massive for us to be on the game. And like you're saying, like, being a big fan of the game, like, to be on the game itself was mad. And that kind of really I think she really got a sense that it wasn't just like a PR thing for us, like it was going to be massive for us as a collective, but me individually, is to be on the soundtrack. And it was just really, really sick. And I remember when we were touring in America when the game came out, and we put the game into the Xbox, and the first song that came on was "Live to Lie." It's just wild. And it's also wicked when you like smash your mates at FIFA and they've got to listen to your band play after it. It's good crack, man.
That's nice. Your bandmates, football fans as well?
Yeah, so we've got Max, who's also a Gooner, and then Dan, our drummer, is a massive United fan. And Matt and Chris, over the years, have got more and more into it. I think, well, Chris's dad was a big Spurs fan, so I think we have a bit of banter about that. And then Matt is just kind of like, I think he said he's had a Liverpool shirt in the past, but I don't know. He's not massively into it, but when, like, if it's on, they'll watch it, and we'll go down to the pub, or if especially when the Euros, the World Cup comes around, we all get bang into it together. Yeah. So
I was thinking when you mentioned Tomas Rosicky, that kind of like, because he's Czech, isn't he? Like that they have that.
Yeah.
Pretty big alternative rock scene there, because also Petr Cech is a drummer, right?
Yeah. Petr Cech is a good drummer, and Thomas, actually, one of the gigs he came down to, he was just like, he's looking at Max's guitars during sound check. He's like, wow, this guitar's so sick. And because he taught himself when he was injured, he taught himself how to play guitar. And so as we were obviously we were about to go on, and Max said, "Oh, why don't you go and line check my guitar?" So Tomas Rosicky went on stage and started riffing like some Slipknot or something. And what's funny is, obviously, like, he was the captain of the Czech Republic. Like, if people know who he is, regardless of if you're massively into football or not. Like, if the captain of your national team is on stage guitar checking something, you're gonna like react. And it was just so funny hearing people being like, "Is that Tomas Rosicky?" Also, they're speaking Czech, but and that night we tried to like go out after the gig, but I guess it become like common knowledge, like all the press, or loads of journos and photographers were like, the paparazzi were outside the venue, and so we ended up just going onto the bus and like having a bunch of beers and that. And he's a good dude, man. He's a really, really good guy. And I'm glad that like somebody that I've watched and cheered on so many times, I've now got a relationship where like he comes now and cheers me on, I guess. So it's kind of it's a wild thing, cool, that football can bring, that football music can have that relationship,
So you said you were a grunger growing up. What kind of bands were you into?
Yeah, I sort of like early years, I kind of was getting into like Linkin Park and System of a Down and Slipknot and stuff like that. And then my taste just sort of continued to. I kept on finding like smaller bands, and just I kind of got really into pop punk and hardcore and emo and all that sort of stuff. And it just continued to evolve. And I mean, I still, if Linkin Park put out a song now, I'll still check it out with enthusiasm. But it's one of those bands that were just really important when I was growing up. Hybrid Theory was just such a massive record for me and my friends, because it just we just couldn't believe that the sort of music we liked was like on the radio and on CD UK or whatever the stuff was. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just wild.
I remember writing out the lyrics to "In the End" as a teenager, and yeah, I was obsessed with that album. And also, like, for me, I remember it being one of the first things that I listened to that sort of crossed a couple of different genres, and
Totally, man.
thinking that actually that's. I know it seems silly to think about this retrospectively now, but actually that's a pretty big moment for me listening to music, because it's not really something that I had engaged with before, and I know that a lot of your music now does a similar thing. So do you presumably you were influenced by that, right?
100%, man. And like, actually, I remember one day there was an occasion when I was out and about, and the fact that I was wearing a Linkin Park hoodie stopped me from getting beaten up. Like,
Really?
these chavs were mugging me and they're about to slap me about a little bit, and one of the dudes was like, "Is that a Linkin Park hoodie?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "I love Linkin Park, they're sick." And I was like, "Cool, can I have my Nokia 3310 back, please?" Or what's going on? Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I think I'm really glad actually that music has changed in that way. I think it's less. There was a time where what music you listen to, like, just there was a stigma around it, both good and bad. And I think, that now that there's a thing where kids today can, like, they can put on a Travis Scott song and then listen to a Yumi Six song, and there's no sort of like judgment or weirdness about it. But growing up, it was such a badge of honor to be a mettler or a rocker. And at the same time, it was like, well, were you listening to Say Solid Crew? Do you know what I mean? Like, it was one of those. So I'm sure there's other people they listen to, but and that was the other thing, is it was actually the music could bring people together that were not meant to be together, if that makes sense. I mean, I remember when I went to college and I became best friends with a dude there, and I remember when, like, it was just so sick that he was showing me music and I was showing him music, and like he'd be showing me like Kano and like Wiley, like going really back at it, like almost like 10 years ago sort of stuff. And his older brother was sort of in skate music and rock music, and so the fact that then that's how we got together on the basketball court, but then we became friends through sharing music with each other, and have been friends ever since. So it can do that. It can sort of really bring strangers together, which is, that's why music is so important, I think. And that's why football is so important and sport is so important, because it can bring strangers together in a way that not many art forms really can,
Yeah, I agree. Hey, your Wikipedia page says that you studied A-level politics.
Yeah, it's true, man. I did. I can't believe that's on Wikipedia. How random.
There's not of your personal bit that takes up one of the sentences as well. Like, it's actually and history and film. It says you also now live in.
How do people know that?
I don't know.
Because I've definitely not gone. I've not got chucked a review of myself on Wikipedia. So that's really interesting.
Esher College. Okay, cool.
Esher College. Yeah, they it was a shame actually, because I was never really that academic, and I kind of really fell in love with my studies at college. Secondary school, I couldn't have cared less, and then Esher College, I was really into it. And then after the first year, it was kind of like, well, are you going to, the opportunity for the band was going well. We wanted to explore it a little bit further, and the college were like, look, we can't facilitate you continuing to study here and going off and, with being in a band and touring and yada, yada, yada. So it's a shame, because my politics teacher, Mayor, was this really amazing dude. And I think he's part of the reason why I really got into politics and got into school. But I wish I'd sort of maintained contact with him, because I'd love him to know that years later on, from being in his classroom, I went on to go and speak at the House of Commons about the ticket tallying side of things. And I'm sure he would have got a kick out of that one of his students had done that.
But you could find him, right? You could probably still find him.
Yeah, I tried to when it was all kicking off and I was going and speaking. I wanted him to be able to tune in, but I don't have Facebook, and I didn't really know how else to do it. I think my mum called the quality. Anyway, I'm completely going off on a tangent, but
No, it's interesting.
yeah.
I have very similar things. I think everyone listening will have at some point tried to contact someone from their past, and it's and it's either gone horribly wrong or yeah. But I wanted to ask you about it because I was listening to some of your new music. "Make Me Feel Alive" is the song I'm thinking of, which that is at times fairly political, and it reminded me a little bit of, I don't know if did you ever listen to Millie and Dead when you were growing up?
I did, yeah. Frank Turner, yeah.
It reminded me a little bit like I felt like it could have been on A Song to Ruin, so I just wanted to know if that was if it's an inspiration or how much you think about politics, how much politics plays a part in your music. And obviously you referenced it earlier in relation to football as well as being being the working man's sport or the working people's sport.
To be honest, I maybe in our early years I've not deliberately avoided it, but I've just realized that, or I'd come to the conclusion that fans of our music don't need to hear my political view. Do you know what I mean? And then as I've gotten older, I've realized more and more that if we're in a position of influence and our power is that we can influence, especially in a positive capacity, like it's actually, you're doing more of a disservice by not sharing your goals, and I think and sort of your aspirations for the future of society. And like, of course, that's so like heavily interlinked with politics. And I think that more and more we're learning about how music and politics are intertwined. And I think, that's why I feel that I never like to shove stuff down people's throats, but I think "Make Me Feel Alive" was an opportunity because I was so frustrated about things that are going on. And again, also in our song, "Our House on Fire," like we're talking about, the planet dying. Like it's not for people to sort of to suggest that global warming isn't real and isn't happening is just one of those things that you really need your people in power, not just domestically but internationally, to like be seriously getting behind that, because we've got to think of the future generations and what's going to happen with that. And what we do now will certainly play a pretty imperative role in how things move forward. But yeah, I think music again is one of those platforms that really does hold weight, and you have to be like aware of that. And like, especially culturally, more and more, I think, do we trust our politicians as much as we trust or admire our favorite musicians? Probably not. So it's like,
almost certainly not.
Yeah. And yeah, I think there's a massive disconnect between those in power and people like myself, because they don't really have any personality. And I mean, I've also like not fallen out, but like, it's interesting when you have debates with people about politics, even in your own band or in music in general, and you can sort of get a pretty interesting scope as to where people are at. So yeah, it's important for me, I think, if I've got something to say, especially if I feel like I'm well versed in it, I've got to make sure that I say it in a way that gets the point across, but doesn't make people feel that I'm saying I'm better than them because I've got that opinion, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's a difficult balance sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've been thinking over the last few months that one of the shames of there not being any supporters in stadiums is that I think the crowd response to Marcus Rashford, wherever he played, would be pretty positive, right?
Oh, mate, I mean, what a
cool guy.
What a cool guy, man. Like, yeah. He's a credit to his club and his country. And I mean, look, it goes back to like, you then start reading stuff that like people are trying to say about him on social media or in news articles, and you realize that like they're scared because there's a shift now, and like people like Marcus Rashford, who is a 22-year-old, he's a man, but he's still a very young man, and for him to take on that level of responsibility, and I think to use his platform for something that is it's a class issue, and he could just completely leave it behind and still look after his family and still look after stuff like he did the other day when he bought a bunch of houses for his family, and everyone's tried to make a whole hoo-ha about it. It's a disgrace, to be honest. And yeah, I think he's a real credit to footballers, actually. And I remember when we went into our first lockdown, everyone was saying, "Oh, shouldn't the players all be getting together and taking pay cuts to pay for X, Y, and Z?" And it's like, isn't it funny that they're going after them? The first people they're going after are the young, rich. A lot of them come from multicultural backgrounds.
Yeah.
It's not the rich aristocratic, and there's nothing wrong with coming from, an affluent background or coming from money. But when you go after those that necessarily haven't, and expect them to empty their pockets when you're not willing to, then there's a big problem there.
Tale as old as time.
Scapegoats. Yeah, totally, man, totally. So that's why I just think, you're so right. Marcus Rashford, as far as I'm concerned, should be. I don't want to ever hear any stories of any football fans around the country giving him any jip. In terms of, it should be nothing but absolute respect, because what he's done is so heavy. It's so wicked that he's done that.
Hey, listen, we have 2 minutes before my non-pro Zoom meeting ends. But I wanted to ask you, firstly, Sucker Punch is the new You Meet Six album. It comes out in January, right?
Yeah, that's the one, man. Yeah.
And you recorded it in Thailand.
We did, yeah.
That's very exciting. Presumably that was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun, and we kind of just made the decision that, we're not going to stay in England. We're definitely not going to record in America right now. And yeah, we'd been there a bunch of times before, and we were just really all focused on sort of like checking out and unplugging from the world. So we found this little utopia in a little fishing village, and 2.5 hours outside Bangkok, and made a record. And it was serene. Like it was one of those experiences that it was unexpected. This far in, and to be blown away by something like that was not something I was expecting to be surrounded by on our 7th album. But yeah, it was pretty special.
Well, listen, man, I'm really looking forward to listening to it. And also, I know you're back on tour in May as well, so hopefully you can, lots of football fans can show up at your gigs.
Hell yeah, man. Hope so.
Hey, well, listen, thanks so much, and take care.
Thank you very much, man. Cheers for your time. I appreciate it.